Okay, so for today's video, I didn't want to do another sketchbook immediately, and didn't know too for well. And then I remembered that I still had a pile of extra pages from how I set up the sheets for printing for my little Mermaid board book, which I really need a better name for. Tiny Mermaid board book, maybe? It has nothing to do with the Disney movie. And realized that they make really good like little notepad things just for like lists or whatever. I thought about using like proper drawing paper, but well, honestly, one, I'm really lazy, and the multimedia paper I use for my travel sketchbooks, it's in like 34 by 20 something sheets, and it's kind of a hassle to cut down, and I didn't feel like dealing with that right now. And the other one is that it's really thick, so when it comes to the littler ones like this, I'll just use just regular printer paper. Like it's nice and it's thin and it's very, very bright white. So they're not so they're okay for like sketching and like a bit of pen like gel pen or whatever, but not for any form of liquid ink. But again, they're this small for like grocery lists or whatever. At first, I was going to properly measure them out, but they ended up being at a slightly off size. So instead, I just kind of put one down on a sheet of paper, and then cut out on a stack of 5 and cut it out. I prefer to do my sketchbook signatures or other small notebooks in 5 sheets, which ends up being 20 pages. It's just a nice even number, decent size thickness. Ended up speeding up the video by about 75%, just because it was getting kind of tedious. Here I've discovered that it's a lot easier to have some form of guide when punching holes in a binding cradle than it is to just either eyeball it or mark it down individually. So I'm just marking down about 1/2 inch and then inch, and then 1/2 inch on the end and then inch in between for the rest of it. Just makes it a lot easier. Ends up with 5 holes. So it for this sort of thing and for my comics as well, I use a pamphlet style binding. It's very simple. I also tend to eyeball my folding just because I'm going to have to trim the ends off anyways. Yeah. Started out doing it properly. If you doing the cover separately, then but these are small enough that it's quite a bit easier to just fold them all at once. Yeah, there's some pieces of my binding cradle. I made it at our local library. For the central one in our library system, they have this really awesome makerspace. And they have a few 3D printers, a bunch of computers, Cintiq, and they have some laser cutters, which I adore. Though I have I have issues setting up the files, and just not the way that my brain works to an extent. I'm just like, wait, how do I do? But yeah, doing that, and then I think I just hot glued the little bits to it. I used a file and instructions. I'll put the link to them in below because they worked really well. The only issue was my plywood was warped slightly, so we ended up putting the laser intensity higher and the speed down, so it ended up really, really charcoaled and burnt. Which, it's a cool effect, but it means that I had to spend about an hour sanding everything down so I didn't get charcoal dust everywhere. Yeah, I'm still trying to get used to having to keep things in camera frame, which is why towards the beginning, there's a few decent chunks that are half out, and then ended up doing a few interesting cuts when I was sewing. And yeah, so here's how the pamphlet stitch works. Start in the middle on the inside, go out, alternating, then do a loop, and skip over the middle to repeat to the other side, go out, and then you finish by going through the middle again, and then you tie it off. I like to make sure that the middle is tied down with the knot at the end. But yeah, there's a few interesting cuts because I kept absentmindedly going to sew and pulling it out of frame, so I'm like, okay, I don't need this 30 seconds of me not doing the table. When it comes to trimming, for QIT binding the first time around, I just put it in my paper cutter, but it's so small that anything over about 5 pages of just, like thin copy paper, it does not like. And what I found works for me with the supplies I have is my carpenter's square and a rotary cutter. Ideally, I should get, a paper cutter where I can have, it's on a track and so it'll cut straight, but this works for now. Then I have my little Fisker's corner rounder. It's really satisfying, has like a little spring to it, just because it makes them look nice. A little bit more finished. The thing with the carpenter's square is that, like, when looking at bookbinding stuff, a lot of the time it'll be referred to as, say, an L square. But if you look for, like, proper bookbinding metal L squares, they end up being, like, $20 or $15. I found this one at Lowe's over with their rulers and such. Rulers, and it was, like, $3-4 maybe? And it's really, really solid and really heavy. So if you ever need, like, any form of, like, yardstick or, like, that sort of thing, outside of, like, if you want something metal for measuring, just go to a hardware store, go to Home Depot, go to Lowe's, go to whatever. They're going to be a lot heavier and cheaper than if you go to an art store, you go to binding supplies or whatever. And that's about it. These will be up in my shop. I'll put a link below for that as well.